It's the kind of story that sounds too awful to be real. A mother and her teenage daughters go for a boat ride and never make it back. Days later, their bodies are found floating in Tampa Bay, bound, gagged, and weighed down. For years, the case goes cold. No witnesses, no clear suspect, just some handwritten directions the killer left behind. Then, detectives try something no one has ever done before. They blow up the suspect's handwriting and plaster it on a giant billboard over a Florida highway. It was groundbreaking, unheard of, the kind of Hail Mary police work that either makes careers or ends them. But it works. That billboard leads them to Oba Chandler, one of the most chilling killers in Florida history. I'm Chris. Let's recap. In their final hours alive, the Rogers women do what every tourist does in Florida. Snap pictures, little moments frozen in time. In that roll of film, it's forever June 1st, 1989, the last day of their vacation. One shows Michelle in their hotel room. She's sunburned, staring straight into the camera. Just a normal vacation photo, until you realize it's one of the last ever taken. These pictures won't end up in family photo albums. They won't be passed around at reunions. Instead, investigators study them like evidence, even using them to estimate the family's time of death. The last shot? A simple picture of the sunset over Tampa Bay. Beautiful, peaceful, almost postcard perfect. Moments later, they leave to meet a man for a boat ride. They never come back. It takes 3 days before the nightmare surfaces. A sailboat returning to Tampa from Key West drifts under the Skyway Bridge. Passengers spot something floating in the water. At first, they think it's debris, but as they get closer, the horror comes into focus. It's a body. A woman, her hands tied behind her back, her legs bound together, duct tape over her mouth. She's nude from the waist down, with a concrete block tied around her neck. Within hours, 2 more bodies are found miles away, closer to St. Petersburg, both in the same condition. Bound, gagged, half naked, weighed down, dumped in the bay. The medical examiner confirms the worst. They were alive when they were tossed overboard and left to drown. The Rogers women set out from Ohio on Friday, May 26, 1989. They have a week's vacation in front of them and a full Florida tour mapped out. SeaWorld, the Jacksonville Zoo, Epcot, Disney, MGM Studios, Busch Gardens. The plan is simple. Cram in as many attractions as possible. The ultimate tourist trip. Back home in Van Wert County, Ohio, Joe's husband Hal stays behind to tend to the dairy farm. Somebody has to milk the cows, feed the calves, and keep the place running from dawn to dusk. And he's happy to give his wife and 2 daughters a week to themselves, away from the grind of farm life. And the girls? They've been buzzing about this trip for weeks, debating which theme parks are must-sees, which ones to skip, sneaking in tanning sessions at the local salon so they won't look too Ohio when they hit the Florida sun. This is a big deal. Their first real family vacation, the first time they've gone anywhere more exotic than the county fair. But when they don't return home in 7 days as expected, Hal panics. This isn't Joe. If they had car trouble, if they decided to take a detour, she would have called, always. He reports them missing in Ohio, then tries to think what to do next. And in that moment of desperation, he does the only thing he can think of. He pulls out a big chunk of money and comes up with a plan. First, hire a plane, then fly the same roads his wife and daughters drove to Florida, scanning from the sky, hoping to spot them. He isn't worried about the farm. He isn't thinking about money. He just wants to find his family. He doesn't know they've already been found. On Thursday, June 8th, a housekeeper at the Days Inn in Tampa finally says something about room 251. For a week, the room has been frozen in time. The women who checked in, they clearly made it upstairs. All their stuff is still there. But here's the problem. Nothing has moved since June 1st, the day they arrived. The beds haven't been slept in. The shower hasn't been touched. No fresh towels tossed aside. No makeup left on the counter. It's like they walked in, then vanished. She goes to the manager, who calls Tampa police. Now remember, by this point, the news has been full of reports about 3 bodies pulled from Tampa Bay. So when officers show up at the Days Inn and peek inside room 251, they realize this could be the missing link. And then, the confirmation. A tech matches fingerprints pulled off a tube of toothpaste in the bathroom to the bodies found floating in the bay. At last, the victims have names. Joe Rogers and her daughters, 17-year-old Michelle and 14-year-old Christe. The next step was the hardest of all, calling Ohio to tell Hal his family was gone. For him, the world had just ended. For investigators, the hunt is only beginning. On the motel registration card, Joe wrote down the make, model, and plate number of their car, an Oldsmobile Calais. But when officers check the Days Inn lot, it's nowhere to be found. So they start combing the area, and sure enough, just a couple of miles away, they spot the car parked at a boat ramp along the Courtney Campbell Causeway. Stuck against the back window is a little toy cow, a reminder of the dairy farm back in Ohio. Inside the car, detectives spot a sheet of Days Inn stationery sitting on the passenger seat. Joe wrote down directions to the boat dock, but one detail jumps right off the page. Blue W/WHT. Whoever they were meeting that night was in a blue and white boat. That was clue number one. Clue number two, even stranger. Police also find a Clearwater Beach brochure in the car. On the back is a map of Tampa Bay, and on that map, someone wrote directions to the Days Inn. But here's the catch. It's not Joe's handwriting. That means the Rogers women met someone the day they were killed, someone who helped them find their motel. But who was it? And how exactly did they cross paths? Clue number 3 is the most disturbing yet. Detectives get a call from the sheriff's office back in Van Wert County, Ohio. They say they have information about the Rogers family investigators in Florida need to hear. And what comes next stops everyone cold. Michelle, the oldest daughter, had been abused for years by her Uncle John. He tied her up. He threatened to kill her if she told anyone. He even recorded the assaults on tape. And John's in prison for another attack on a different woman, doing 7 to 25 years. Michelle never wanted to press charges herself. She just wanted him out of her life. This trip to Florida, it was her chance to escape, to finally breathe. But now detectives have to wonder, did John set this up from behind bars? The similarities are chilling. Michelle's hands tied back on the farm. Michelle's hands tied in Tampa Bay. Both times signs of sexual assault. Could the man who terrorized her in Ohio have found a way to finish the job in Florida? Using someone else? Someone with a boat as his weapon? Detectives go to the Ohio prison to talk to John Rogers, but it quickly becomes clear he had nothing to do with the murders. He didn't even know about Joe and the girl's trip to Florida, and his prison records show no visitors or phone calls that could connect him to it. In the end, detectives agree. John is guilty of terrible things in Ohio, but he didn't plan what happened in Tampa Bay. With him ruled out, they're back to square one. No suspects, no real leads. Then, in the fall of 1989, they catch a break. A Canadian tourist was assaulted on a boat off of Madeira Beach, not far from Tampa. The date? May 15th, 2 weeks before the Rogers murders. The boat? Light blue with white interior. The woman was 24, on vacation with a friend. At a 7-Eleven, they met a man calling himself Dave. He said he owned an aluminum company. He was polite, charming, the kind of guy who seemed safe enough. He invited them out on his boat the next day. The friend wasn't interested, but the woman went anyway. At first, he played the part, friendly, chatty, showing her the water. When they docked, he invited her back that night for a sunset cruise. She showed up alone. He didn't seem happy about that. Out on the water, the mask dropped. He pawed at her, told her they were going to have sex. When she resisted, he forced himself on her and threatened to duct tape her mouth shut. Then he threw her camera into the bay before he brought her back to the shore. So why didn't he kill her? Because he knew her friend could identify him if she went missing. Sound familiar? The Rogers camera was also never found. They were also lured out for a sunset cruise, and the timing was almost identical. Same playbook, same man, same boat. Only this time, the victim lived to tell the story. With the Canadian woman's story, detectives finally have something concrete, a face. She gives them a detailed description, and police turn it into a sketch that they feed to the media, along with a description of his boat, light blue with white interior. The suspect's face is everywhere, on TV, in newspapers, plastered across Florida. Tips start pouring in, phone calls, letters, people swearing they've seen the boatman. But just like before, Every single lead fizzles. The man in the sketch is still a ghost. Fast forward to 1991, 2 years since the Rogers murders, and detectives are still at a dead end. So they ask the FBI Behavioral Science Unit for a profile, and what they get back is chilling. It says this wasn't some random crime of opportunity. The killer fantasized about an attack like this for a long time. He wanted multiple victims, and he wanted to watch them suffer. Think back to that Canadian tourist attack just 2 weeks before. She and her friend had both been invited on the boat, but when only one showed up, his plan fell apart. One victim wasn't enough for what he had in mind, so he assaulted her, but had to let her go. 2 weeks later, he found the Rogers women, a mother and 2 daughters, perfect targets for the fantasy he'd been building. He charmed them, got them to the boat ramp, and once they were out on the bay, he turned on them. According to the profile, he tied them, gagged them, but left their eyes uncovered so he could watch their fear. The FBI thinks this wasn't his first attack. Predators like this need practice before they can handle more than one victim at a time. And since 2 years had passed without him being caught, he almost certainly felt confident enough to try again. Only next time, he'll be even better at hiding the evidence. And the profile gives detectives one more crucial clue. This killer isn't a drifter. He owns a boat, he knows the water, he knows the land, he almost certainly lives right here in Tampa Bay. In fact, the killer, a 43-year-old aluminum siding contractor, lives with his wife and daughter just a few miles from the very boat ramp where Joe, Michelle, and Christe Rogers vanished. His house sits on a canal that leads straight into Tampa Bay, and he owns a blue and white bayliner he takes out a lot at night. And here's the kicker. When police first put out that sketch back in November 1989, one of his neighbors recognizes him. She even tells a deputy about it, but nothing happens. The tip just fizzles. Then, 3 years after the murders, detectives try something radical. They blew up the killer's handwriting, the directions he wrote on the brochure found in the Rogers car, and slap it on 5 giant billboards. It's totally groundbreaking for the time, and it works. Within 24 hours of those billboards going up in July 1992, his neighbors fax over work orders with his handwriting, a perfect match to the note found in the Rogers car. At last, the faceless boatman has a name. Oba Chandler. So, who is Oba Chandler? He's not some hard-working family man who just happened to own a boat. He has a rap sheet that stretches back years. Theft, kidnapping, assaults, armed robbery. In other words, he fits the FBI profile perfectly. A local man, familiar with the Bay, practiced at controlling women, and bold enough to believe he can get away with murder. His personal life is a mess. He's been married at least 7 or 8 times and has 8 kids with 7 different women. Over the years, he's called himself all kinds of things. An X-ray tech, a draftsman, a property manager, an aluminum contractor. Basically, whatever fits the moment. He's originally from Ohio, which might explain how he got Joe Rogers talking when he saw those Ohio plates on her car. By the time police close in, he's already sold off his blue and white bayliner and packed up his family, moving 3 hours away to the other side of Florida. Classic move. Ditch the evidence, change the scenery, pretend like nothing happened. And of course, when police confront him, he swears he's innocent. He admits he met the women, but says he just gave them directions to their hotel, nothing more. He even admits he was out on his boat that same night. Phone records show calls to his wife, proving he was in the exact area where the Rogers bodies were found. His excuse? Engine trouble. He claims he was stuck out there all night, fixed it in the morning, and went home. But investigators aren't buying it, and they aren't done digging. Detectives bring the Canadian woman and her friend down to Florida to view a lineup. Both of them point straight at Oba. Then they track down one of his adult daughters and her husband living in Cincinnati. They remember that right after police released the sketch in late 1989, Oba showed up at their front door, out of nowhere. He told them Florida police were after him for killing some women. He didn't go into detail, but they never forgot those words or the shock they felt hearing them. When the case finally goes to trial, jurors, especially the women, have a visceral reaction to Oba. They can't stand to look at him. When it comes time to deliberate, it takes them just 5 minutes to find him guilty. Then they sit for another hour, praying, crying, and preparing themselves before telling the judge their verdict. Oba Chandler is sentenced to death. In November 2011, at 65 years old, he finally faces execution. Asked if he has any last words, Oba stays silent. Instead, he hands guards a handwritten note that read, "You are killing an innocent man today." Another lie. Just one more in a lifetime full of them. And even after his death, his crimes kept catching up with him. In 2014, DNA from a rape kit tied him to another unsolved murder, the 1990 killing of 20-year-old Evelise Berrios Bigoriz in Broward County, Florida. She worked at the Sunrise Mall, and investigators believe Oba stalked her for days. He slashed her tires, played the helpful stranger, then turned predator. Hours later, her nude body was dumped near a mailbox, wrists and ankles marked by ligatures, brown packing tape still stuck in her hair. Oba Chandler wasn't innocent. He wasn't misunderstood. He was a predator, a liar, and a monster. And the world is better off without him, wouldn't you agree? If this story grabbed you and you want to go even deeper, there's an incredible article called Angels and Demons by Thomas French that was originally published in the St. Petersburg Times. It's Pulitzer Prize-winning reporting and honestly a must-read. A lot of the details we covered here came straight from his work. We've linked it in the pinned comment below. Definitely check it out. For now, thanks for watching. I'm Chris. Amy and I are here 3 times a week. Until next time, take care.